I should say that the studies are quite new, so the ideas that will be presented are still at the initial stage of being formed. So the research was done in Syunik. We started in 2020, worked for 3 years, and we have done study in those communities where we have urban population. When we say urban population, women communities where there is no possibility of doing agriculture. So we have looked at Apankajar and Goris Megri, and we do not have any information from Sishan yet. We have involved about 70 participants. And we had the following research question. Wild plants used in the city. So procurement or acquisition of wild plants in the city. In terms of methodology, it was important for us to actually differentiate the knowledge which they had in the city and what actual practices there are in the city. Why I'm mentioning that? Because the cities are basically fed demographically by the rural areas, and people from rural areas usually possess some knowledge and bring with them what they have learned about those wild plants from their ancestors. They have this knowledge. However, in the urban environment, they're not able to apply this knowledge. And here it is very important to make a distinction between the two. To this end, it was very important for us to see how it is being used in terms of ethnography and in terms of species. So when we talk about species, it would be good to take samples of those species specifically from the urban neighborhood. It could be dried plant, it could be preserved or stored in any other way. And also to actually record the practices of using wild plants in the urban setting. In terms of methodology, we thought that it would be appropriate to look at the shops and markets where those plants are being sold based on the idea that demand creates or drives supply. We can say that fairly rich representative data on the ethnobotany of the city can be obtained from research of wild plants, trade at the permanent markets, shops, and mobile markets, and the individual vendors and traders. So if they bring, for example, plants which are not known to the urban population, they won't be sold, which is economically probably ineffective, and therefore they're trying to bring plants which are known to people. So to this end, individual sellers or shops or retailers were the target population for ethnographic research, and they landed quite good and interesting results. So you see on the slide, Lapan market for plants. It is located near the statue of David Beck. So there is also a bus station here, and the market is actually at the bus station. So people from different communities bring in the morning those wild plants here, sell them, and live in the afternoon. So this market is well known in the city. So whatever plant is needed for different purposes, they can find it. Here, basically, they usually sell edible plants. Even people in the surrounding villages who do not have an opportunity to collect those themselves or cannot do that themselves, they come and buy them here. So I'm not going to list all the plants. For example, we have Kermanzuk, Churcherot, Khazas, which are used in the well-known Jinggalov huts. That's Artsakh bread with greens. So those are the local names that I use. And those include maiden steers, mallow, porcelain, amaranth, etc. Besides that, there is also so-called market under the roof. That's a closed market where they also sell dried, not fresh plants. There is also a similar market in Goris, that's herbal market of Goris, where there is, it's not a corner, it's a larger space where throughout the year they have 5 or 6 people who sell herbs, which they collect from nearby areas. Because the city is smaller, the space is also smaller. And they sell edible and tea herbs, sometimes also some greens which are, let's say, preserved, some of the syrups, jams, etc. In Mehri, and this is less evident, probably taking into account the fact that the size of this town is smaller. There is no special market, but in individual shops you can find those wild herbs. Basically, those are located in the center of the city or along the road. You can find tea herbs, and from the wild herbs you can find very limited quantity. It's sarikins, so-called, and sometimes you have also so-called bohi and several others. Next source for the people to find wild herbs is to learn about those wild herbs is to ask for their for the help of their relatives in the villages. So actually, these people, there are some people who share their time between the city and the village. For example, they come for the weekdays to the city to work and then leave on the weekends to actually engage in agriculture and take care of their uh, animals. And sometimes these people also collect and bring with them wild herbs, or it is being done by their grandparents, parents, or relatives. And this helps them to suffice their needs related to the herbs. Plants are gathered also in the urban environment, but uh, the diversity of the species is very limited. So they basically collect ruderal weeds or herbs which are growing in the areas which have been impacted by man or human activity. So, for example, amaranth, maidensteres, mallow, purslane, plantain grow in human affected disrupted ecosystems. I'm not going to list all of them, but they could be collected in urban environment in the parks or adjacent urban areas. But in terms of their volume, they're quite limited and not sufficient to supply the need. Now let's talk about the knowledge and how the culture of using those wild herbs is developing. There are several factors that contribute to this, and I have included here internal and external factors. The factor number one is vitality of particular plant use practices. When you move to urban environment, many things become less vital. For example, in the interaction with, for example, cattle, you get some parasites and you have to be treated, which is less, I would say, present in the urban environment, and you don't need to be treated against them. And the plants which are also connected with that practice do not exist here, so therefore they become less vital. The next issue is availability of particularly useful plants or the plants which are being used. Many of those plants do not grow in the urban environment, and therefore they're not available, and it leads to lost culture. The next one is external one, the origin of knowledge about the use of plants. It is external one. The fourth one is rather an internal one. That's the reaction of the urban society. How the urban society actually, what is the attitude of urban society to the use of those plants? And the fifth factor is possibility for recreation of conditions necessary for actually engaging in specific land use practices here. It is important to note that there is interaction between these factors, and with each new influx of the people coming from rural to urban area, or with new members of the family moving from village to the city, these factors can reappear very quickly. It is possible to imagine that if this is a very schematic presentation, if we look very schematically, we may say that if we have, let's say, influx of people from three villages, 300 species, plant species could be used. In case of 10 plant use practices, 30 new species would be introduced. But that's not true. Our study has shown that urban culture of plant use is being developed when people from different rural areas coming to the city have, let's say, a space where all their cultures coincide, and only this intersection of the three becomes urban culture of plant use. So the three circles, and if the practices of the different places do not match, then they are being left out and remain as internal culture for that specific family. It's part of the microculture or part of their micro identity. And at the last stage, the last, I would say, feature is being developed when you look at the possibility of cultivating those plants in the city, demand for it, availability, probably this much. And thank you very much. If there are questions, please, thank you.